So this right here is a map that I drew for Minnesota, and it tended also, kind of to be a fair map, at least in my mind, but it also, tended to also be kind of communities of interest as well. This first district right here is actually intended to be a relatively, not, swing, but kind of like a, competitive seat. It's a Trump-less 6 seat that includes Rochester and I want to say Mantaco, Minnesota. Some of these more Democratic, these Minnetonka's right over here, Rochester's over here. Some of these more Democratic leaning parts of southern Minnesota. It's it's interesting because like you have a lot of farming that takes place down here, and farmers did swing to the right, but unlike the Iron Rangers, they kind of came back a little bit to the Democrats because of the whole tariff thing. In fact, Democrat Dan Feehan almost won this seat in 2018, 2020. In fact, under a map like this, he probably would have defeated Jim Hagedorn both times. You've got you've got a second district that's right over here that's intended to include some of the suburbs of of St. Paul, and it's a pretty democratic seat. It's not as democratic as the others, though. Like say this one, these suburbs of Minneapolis. That this is a pretty democratic seat, although mind you, in 2012, Obama only narrowly wins the seat. This seat is downtown St. Paul. Again, this is a pretty democratic seat, and then finally you've got the ultra safe democratic seat here in downtown Minneapolis. Ilhan Omar would actually, I shouldn't say that because Ilhan Omar is having electoral issues, but like a pretty progressive Democrat would have a pretty easy time winning here. You've got this sixth district, which is a pretty Republican seat, and you can actually tell this, unlike on the previous map, this version of the map actually does not. This version of the sixth district does not vote for Amy Klobuchar, and the same thing is true with this seventh seat, which is also located, down more in the southwestern part of the state. This district also doesn't vote for Amy Klobuchar. On the previous map, she has won all of the districts in each of her elections, but this under this map, she would probably not. And I guess even under any map, I think it's unlikely she's going to win all of the districts yet again because she barely won these two under their previous iterations, and she doesn't win them under this map. And then finally, you've got this northern eighth district, which is obviously based in Duluth, and some of these more Native American portions right over here, and this Arrowhead right area has traditionally been very Democratic, but has swung to the right, particularly around the Iron Range over here. And so you've got a district that is pretty Republican now. And with an incumbent like Pete Stauber, I don't think the Democrats would be able to make a play for a district like this. But overall, you've got what I consider to be a pretty decently fair map for the state of Minnesota. It's a 4-4 map when you think about it. Now you've got a state like Wisconsin, which is actually, a bit different from Minnesota in the sense that, geography advantages Republicans in a state like this. Unlike Nevada, where geography arguably advantages the Democrats. So what I've got is a pretty, what I consider to be as fair a map, I think, as you can draw. This first district right here, you notice is a bit of a change from some of the other iterations of this map in the sense that by not including it in the Waukesha area and sort of stretching it down, all across right over here. This actually creates a marginal district that Democrats potentially have a shot in. Trump only wins it by 3 points. It votes for Tammy Baldwin by double digits, and Tony Evers also wins the seat. This is pretty predictable. This is your you've got your Madison-based seat, pretty Democratic. This seat is more in the takes in some of the driftless area, and it's a pretty Republican version of this district. Trump wins it by double digits, as does Scott Walker, although it does vote for Tammy Baldwin. And you've got La Crosse, which is over here, but still this is a fairly Republican trending seat. It's unlikely that Ron Kine would be able to hold on a district like this. This is you've got your Milwaukee-based seat. Not much to say, but if we pull up the numbers, this is the only seat I believe in the state where whites are not a majority. You've got this Waukesha, Azauki, Washington-based seat. These are basically based in the suburbs of Milwaukee, and it's a pretty Republican seat. It's also a seat that Leah Vukmir wins, and that Scott Walker actually does better in 2018 than Trump. So it's not true with most of Wisconsin. You've got the sixth district, which is again, this is the other seat that that Leah Vukmir wins, and so you can get a sense of how Republican this area is. This is the northern Wisconsin-based seat, and you've got towns like Superior over here. You've got, I think, Menominee County, which is the most Democratic county in the state. It's home to a Native American population. And then you've got Eau Claire, which is a pretty Democratic area. But overall, this is a very Republican seat. Tammy Baldwin, however, does win it by less than a point. Finally, you've got the COI version of the seat that I've drawn. This is basically intended to include Oshkosh, Appleton, and Green Bay are all located in this pretty compact seat. Trump does win it by about 8.5 points, but again, Tammy Baldwin does win the seat. So I argue that's a pretty fair way to draw the eighth seat, and a Republican like Mike Gallagher, I would argue, would do pretty well there. So overall, that is my map of Wisconsin. So this is my map of Missouri. And I think it's a bit appropriate that Missouri immediately follows Wisconsin, because I would argue in some ways Wisconsin may very well be trending the way of Missouri. And of the three, Rust Belt states, part of the blue wall that Biden was able to flip back, I would argue Wisconsin is probably the most concerning for Democrats in the long run. The fear that it could end up in a state like this. This is a republic. This is a much more Republican version of Wisconsin in some ways. This is Missouri, and I've also drawn a 6-2 map, just like the previous one was. You've got this is a not quite a VRA seat. I don't know if I can draw a VRA seat, in downtown St. Louis, but I put in as many African Americans as possible in order to enhance their voting power. But this is a very safe Democratic seat, and obviously not much to say about here. This is sort of the one that I think I did a bit differently from how it was really done. You've got, scroll down to the presidential results. You can tell here Trump only wins the seat by about 1.5 points. I think they drew this district in reality to be a bit more Republican than I think Trump may have won it by 5 on the map they drew. But this is what I would argue to be basically the rest of St. Louis County and this part of St. Charles County, pretty suburban seat, pretty competitive seat, but a Republican like Ann Wagner would probably be able to hold it down. The rest of these districts are sort of what you would expect. This is some of the more areas of eastern Missouri, particularly Jefferson County, which is growing quickly, Stasian-Aviv County, and some of these more areas over here. This is, again, a pretty Republican seat. This seat is also in an area that, at one time might have been Democratic, but has shifted very hard to the right. This is Vicky Hartzler's seat, who actually unseated the Democratic incumbent here. But not much to say here. This is the Kansas City-based seat, takes in as much of the Democratic portions of Kansas City Metro as possible. And, under a fair map, this is what this district would look like. There have been Republican proposals to basically gerrymander Kansas City out of being able to elect a Democratic representative, but I would argue this is a pretty fair map. This is northern Missouri. Again, not much to say here. This is this right over here is, I believe, Springfield. I believe Joplin's over here. This is actually a very Republican seat for what is considered to be, relatively urban area. And then finally, you've got your Q seat right over here. This area kind of over here, down over here, ancestrally Democratic. And again, there's probably Q potential in a district of this if Jason Smith were to retire. So this is my map of Missouri. So this is a fair map of Arkansas. These first and fourth districts are not really much to talk about here, but you can tell these are very Republican rural seats. This second district right here is really the main one you want to talk about, because this is actually a seat that's intended to elect a Democratic congressman. It basically takes in these African American portions of the Mississippi Delta, as well as then going in to take in Little Rock. So we've got some African American towns right over here as well. That also are intended to make sure that the seat stays in Democratic hands. So, and then finally, you've got this third district over here that's that's based in some of the more areas of Arkansas that used to be ancestrally Republican. And they're the parts of Arkansas that went Republican before the rest of the state did. And you've got Bentonville, you've got Fayetteville. Bentonville, by the way, is actually home to a growing Pacific Islander community. There are Marshallese people that are moving to Bentonville. So overall, you've got a pretty compact seat, but still very Republican seat in a state, part of the state that was always been Republican. It's actually Republicans won this congressional district starting in 1966 and have held it ever since then, whereas the other three districts only started electing Republicans in 2010 or 2012. But this one has been held by the Republicans ever since 1966. We're now going to take a look at the state of Michigan, and I've done something I think a little bit interesting that what the commission didn't do, but I would argue is a pretty good way to do it. This is your standard Upper Peninsula Northern Michigan seat. This seat is again, this is more based in the northwestern part of the state, but is also actually, I should scroll down to see the presidential numbers. So we've got a Republican seat in the Northern Peninsula in Northern Michigan. This seat right here is also pretty Republican. This seat is actually a Democratic-leaning seat. This is Grand Rapids, as well as some of these more Dutch areas right over here that are actually kind of Democratic trending. You've got this district right here that sort of includes the thumb and wraps around some of this area right here. This is actually a pretty Republican district, although mind you, this one I think is actually more Republican here because some of this area right here is actually quite Republican. For the 5th district, this is some of the more industrial heartland is located here. You've got Genesee County right over here. This is Flint. Saginaw over here. You've got Bay County, and then you've got Midland over here. And you basically have for a very competitive district, Biden only wins by 2 points. But in eras past, this would have been a very safe Democratic seat. For the 6th district, you've got this based over here. This is Kalamazoo. It's located in this area right over here. And it's a Republican-leaning seat. Trump wins it by 2 points, but it is competitive. This 7th district is also very Republican. This is downstate Michigan. And then we got to zoom in to get to see the Detroit-based seats. Well, actually, first, before we get to Detroit, we have the seat that I drew that is based. This is Ann Arbor right over here, and this is Lansing right over here. And so this is a fairly Democratic seat. It's actually a very Democratic seat. Republicans really wouldn't have a shot here. For this 9th district, this is based in some of the suburbs of this northwestern portion of Wayne County, Macomb County, and then you've got some of Orange County over here. And it's a pretty Democratic seat. This right over here would be the 10th seat. It's a Republican portion of the Detroit suburbs, and someone like John James would have a pretty good time winning right over here. This is suburbs mainly based in Orange County and some of Wayne County. And excuse me, and overall very Democratic seat. You've got this seat that's based in some of those southern suburbs of I believe Dearborn is also in the seat, but I could be wrong on that. And actually we can bring up we can actually bring up towns and I can actually verify that. But either way, the 12th district is intended to be a very Democratic seat. Oh yeah, so yeah, Dearborn is in fact in this 12th district. This 13th seat right over here is about as Democratic a seat as you can draw. This is a seat that, again, Rashida Tlaib would have no problem winning. Biden actually gets 90% of the vote in the seat. And if we scroll up here, this is actually the state's VRA seat. The way that the commission drew the map in actuality does not create any VRA seats, but I would argue that it's very much possible to have a VRA seat in Michigan. I would argue it's arguably required to have at least one, but the way the commission drew it actually did not result in the creation of Yeah, this is not true. This is the 13th. This is the 12th. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but if we look at this, yeah. So I would argue that this seat has to be majority black, but according to the Voting Rights Act. But the way they drew it, there are no VRA seats, and actually, Detroit is going to have no African Americans in its congressional delegation, I believe, for the first time since 1954, and that's pretty crazy when you think about it. So I would argue that in some ways, the commission, I think, could have done a better job with drawing, Detroit, particularly ensuring African American representation. All right, so this is a bit of a compact map that I drew for Iowa. This is actually what I consider to be a fair map for the state. The state doesn't, usually try to split counties, although I think it's required at a couple points, but I try to minimize that as much as possible. So this first district includes Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, which is the most Democratic part of the state. You've also got Dubuque and Davenport over here. So this basically if we scroll down here, this creates a pretty Democratic seat. This is a more Republican seat in the eastern rural parts of the state. This is the Des Moines, West Des Moines, and Ames-based seat. And that's also pretty Democratic, although it's not as Democratic as this one. It's only Biden plus 8. And then finally, you've got this western base seat that's the most Republican district in the state. You've got Sioux City over here, Council Bluffs over here. So there's some parts of the state that are more suburban and are more Republican trending. Overall, it's a pretty safe Republican seat, and this is I consider to be a fair map of Iowa. So this is a map that I drew of Hawaii. It's a pretty fun map. It's pretty standard in how it was drawn. You've got urban Honolulu that's located here. And then you've got the remainder of the islands that are basically in the other district. The districts are actually roughly even politically, but if you look at some of the more precinct level data, you zoom in like in some of the more rural parts of some of the more outer islands, you actually can see stronger support for Democrats than in some parts of Honolulu, particularly the parts of Honolulu that are military bases. You'll actually find strong Republican support in some of those precincts. But overall, this is a through and through Democratic state. And it's one that I don't think Republicans really have a chance in. So this is a map of Ohio that I drew that's actually based on a concept that I saw someone on Elections Daily draw, but it's basically meant to be a fair map. And here's how I did it. So this first district right here is Cincinnati, and we scroll down to see the presidential numbers. Yeah, so you see the presidential numbers, and you can see how Democratic the seat is. But in 2016, the seat votes for Rob Portman. But it's a pretty Democratic seat overall, and it would be one of the 4 Democratic seats in the state. This is the suburbs of the outer suburbs of Cincinnati. Very Republican area, although it is kind of Democratic trending. This is the seat that's based in Columbus. Democratic through and through. Nothing really there to say. I tried to make it a VRA seat, but I actually wasn't able to. This seat is actually plurality white. If anyone knows how to make a Democratic seat, a VRA seat in Columbus, I'd love to see that. This seat is northern, sort of these northern parts of Ohio, north of Columbus. Very Republican, not much to talk about. This seat is in Western Ohio. This is the most Republican part of the state, and Jim Jordan would have a very easy time winning in a seat like this. And you can just tell how strong Rob Portman is. He won this district by nearly, I think, 58 points. Yeah, so pretty Republican. This seat is actually based in the more Appalachian parts of southeastern Ohio. And I believe Steubenville might even be located right over here. And I believe Athens is over here. This is Monroe County, which was traditionally Democratic, but has become Republican. It's a very Republican seat. I think it has the potential for a Q-aligned candidate. But it's actually a district where Democrats have latent, down ballot strength. You see that Jim Renacci only wins this seat by 24, like about 24, 25 points. You've got the 7th district, which is a kind of swing district that I drew in the southwestern suburbs of Cleveland. Cuyahoga County is right over here. This is Lorain County. And it's a seat that I think that if Anthony Gonzalez were running in, he would have a pretty good time locking down. This eighth seat is also very Republican, some areas south of Columbus. This ninth seat is northwestern Ohio. This is Marcy Kaptur seat. This is wow. Lucas County is right over here. This is home to Toledo, and you've got some areas right over here. So this is a very fair fight seat. Biden actually only wins this district by 0.3%, and it's actually less than what Clinton won it by. But Marcy Kaptur might be able to hold the seat down, unless she really tanks. This 10th seat is actually a Republican leaning seat that's based on Dayton, Montgomery County. And Turner, though, should be able to hold down. He's pretty popular there. For the 11th seat, this is not much to talk about. This is actually the VRA seat of Ohio. Takes in African American parts of Cleveland as well as Akron. So not much to talk about here. This is a suburban seat in the northern Columbus, and this right here is Delaware County, which is a Democratic trending Republican county. And overall, the district is one that Biden wins by about 14.5 points, and it's one that Democrats should be able to do well in. This district right here includes parts of Akron as well as city of Canton, and it's I'd say a pretty evenly divided seat that both sides would have a fair fight at. This is northeastern Ohio. This is Mahoning County. This is Trumbull County. This is the Youngstown area, and Ashtabula right over here. I think this is Lake County over here as well, which is some of the suburbs of Cleveland, which have actually trended to the right. This district has actually gotten pretty Republican, although, mind you, Sherrod Brown wins this district, and Sherrod Brown also wins this district. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then finally, you've got this seat, which I've drawn, which is kind of some of this leftover area as well, which is, again, another pretty Republican county. Sorry, Republican districts, mind you. But if you look at the 2018 numbers for the Senate, Sherrod Brown kind of holds Jim Renacci to about a 12.5 point margin here. And some of this area right over here, I think, has down ballot Democratic strength. Like you look at the race for the Ohio Supreme Court in 2020. You actually see, the Democratic aligned candidate kind of doing well down in this region over here. So that is something to keep in mind when you look at Ohio. All right, so this is the last map we're going to look at for this video, and it's actually the one I most recently completed, and it's one that I'm actually quite proud of. This is New York, if you couldn't tell already, and I've actually done some interesting things to this that I haven't seen, done that often, but I think it's meant to maximize competitive districts and also, represent communities that have not been represented on other maps. So first of all, okay, you've got this. So I'm not sure if the map is actually going to cooperate here, but you've got the Long Island-based seats. This first district is Republican leaning. Let's just scroll this up a little bit. You've got this first district, which is kind of Republican leaning. Trump wins it by 4.5. This district, which is kind of Democratic leaning, in that Biden wins it by 3.5. And then you've got this district, which is pretty evenly divided. But you look further down the ballot, you actually see Andrew Cuomo does decently well here in this sort of this part of the state. Andrew Cuomo is an interesting benchmark to look at because he ran roughly even with Biden's margin overall, but his coalition was very different. You can, as you can probably tell, like Long Island constitutes a stronger part of Cuomo's coalition than it did with Biden. And you've got the first of 13 seats that include portions of New York City. And starting with this one that's mainly based on more, Democratic portions of Long Island. This is, but also going into Queens. This is actually a first of several majority-minority seats. This seat, which is based in Queens, also is majority-minority. Oh my goodness, okay. Give me a second here. This district over here is also, so this fifth district right over here is also a majority minority, and it's not much to talk about here. but it actually is plurality black, unlike some of the other seats, which are either VRA seats or plurality white. This seat is majority Asian American, and there's actually a bit of a swing to the right here because Trump actually did quite well with Asian Americans, much more so than in previous elections. This seventh district, which covers Queens and Bronx and the Bronx, this is the first of three majority Latino districts. This is a Brooklyn-based seat that's plurality white. This seat right over here would be Hakeem Jeffries' seat, and this is majority African American. Now, what I've done with this 10th district is actually a little bit unique here. This right over here is Borough Park. There's also some more Republican portions of Queens and like Brooklyn over here, but this is mainly based in Borough Park. It also takes in Williamsburg as well. And the previous map, the map that they drew this time is one of my biggest pet peeves in that it splits the Orthodox Jewish community among 2 or 3 different districts, whereas this one tries to keep them together. It results in a district that actually votes for Trump narrowly in 2016, but then votes for him by double digits in 2020. The Hasidic community tends to swing very wildly when it comes, depending on the elections. Like you can see that this district voted for Cuomo by nearly 17 points, and yet Trump wins it by double digits in 2020. The same thing, by the way, is kind of true with this Staten Island-based seat that also takes in places like Bensonhurst, this portion of Long Island, which also has some Orthodox Jews in it as well. But see, this is also the second Republican congressional district in New York City. These 2 districts would be the only 2 that Republican districts in the country that I think could be considered urban, as opposed to suburban or rural. These 2 are, I think, the only ones you can draw that would be both urban and Republican. So Staten Island, particularly these portions of Staten Island, are very Republican. This northern part, though, is a bit more liberal. But you can also tell Staten Island was very much a part of Cuomo's coalition, as he did win this seat in 2018. This is the only majority white Democratic seat in New York City. This is Manhattan, and also includes the upper portions of the Upper East Side as well. There's also some Asian Americans in this district, but overall, this is mainly based in the upper scale portions of Manhattan, like the highly college educated portions, and places where rich people live, essentially. This district is majority minority, includes this portion of Queens right over here. It's and also this portion of Western Manhattan. This 14th district would be AOC's district. It's the second of 3 majority Latino districts. This 5th district, which also stretches into the Bronx and Westchester County, is also a majority Latino district. And then finally, you've got a seat for Jamal Bowman, which is majority minority. That's mainly based in Westchester County, but also includes a portion of the Bronx. Now, zooming out, we're gonna get to see some of the more upstate portions. This is the 17th district, which is relatively competitive. You see, the goal here was to draw as many competitive districts as I could. So this is the rest of Westchester County. So you've got places like Peekskill. You've got Rockland County, which has some very Hasidic portions, as well as this portion of Orange County, which is home to the municipality of Palm Tree, which locally is known as Kiryas Joel. And so you've got some Hasidic communities in these areas that swing pretty wildly. Like they supported, these Hasidic communities very much supported Trump by Stalinist margins, but they also supported Andrew Cuomo. So on a dime, these areas can swing very wildly. But overall, you've got a seat that someone like Sean Patrick Maloney would probably be able to do pretty well in. Now we move over here. This is This is more mid Hudson Valley, upper Hudson Valley. You've got some of this portions of Orange County right over here that are more Latino. And then you've also got Putnam County, which is a more Republican part of the Hudson Valley. Then you've got Dutchess County, home to Mark Molinaro, and then you've got Ulster County, home to Pat Ryan. And you can actually see by the governor numbers here, this is a big portion of where Andrew Cuomo actually underperforms, because you notice that Biden wins the seat by about nearly 10 points. But Cuomo really does not, he actually loses this district by 2 points. So you already get into the parts of the state where that are not part of Cuomo's coalition. And this is kind of fun because you've got Mark Molinaro and Pat Ryan in the district that they would run against each other in here. This 19th district is the third of what I'd say all three of these districts are quite competitive, but this one is the more Republican leaning of the three. And you can tell just how much Andrew Cuomo underperforms here. Mark Molinaro wins the seat by like 14 and a half points. And you've got Sullivan County right over here. This is home to Woodburn. A lot of people like to go up here for summer vacation in the Catskills. Delaware County, you've got some of these more Democratic areas. Right over here is Utica. Right over here is Binghamton. So this overall creates for a pretty competitive seat that votes for Trump by about 5 points. But it's one that Democrats would have a shot in a blue wave year. The rest of the map, I think, is much of what you would expect. This is the Albany Schenectady based seat, pretty Democratic. This is North Country. Elise Stefanik would not have a hard time here. This is this right over here is Syracuse, and this is Ithaca. So this creates a pretty Democratic seat. But if you look at the governor numbers here, wow, you see right over here, this Albany-based seat votes for Mark Molinaro. You go over here, Molinaro absolutely dominates this district. This district also votes for Mark Molinaro. Actually, no, I'm wrong about that. This seat is actually too Democratic for Mark Molinaro to win. But you can tell Cuomo's only winning it by 3.5, and it's got Ithaca in here. But with Syracuse and Ithaca in the seat, it's a pretty Democratic seat. But it's one that in the right circumstances, I think a Republican might be able to make a close race in. This is southern tier, parts of the southern tier, and some of these areas right over here. This is another Republican seat, and this is yet another Republican seat. One that I think that Claudia Tenney would not have that much of a problem in one of these two seats, although, mind you, she is a serial underperformer. But I think a seat like this would be too red for, I think, Democrats to really make a play for here. And again, you see just how much the upstate is Molinaro country, because this Rochester-based seat that Biden wins by over 20 points, Cuomo is only getting like barely a majority here. Same thing with this Buffalo-based seat. If the numbers will come up here. Okay, so Cuomo does a bit better here, but overall, you can tell just how much more Cuomo relies on New York City and Long Island, in order to put together his coalition, and how unpopular he is in the upstate. So that's something that's potentially to watch in this year's election, is that Lee Zeldin might make. It's not to say that New York is competitive, but watch the upstate and just see whether or not Cuomo really tanks here, whether he's able to make up for it with some of this area down here. But overall, this is my map of New York State, and it's one that I'm actually really proud of, particularly because I get to highlight, some of the issues with, representation of Orthodox Jews within Congress, and how that could be better, how the maps could be better drawn in that regard, as well as some of the different trends that you'd see, in a state like this. I have some maps that I'm working on, in other states that I haven't completed yet, and hopefully I'll get to show you those sometime. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.